Hello, hello, and welcome back or welcome to the Yogi Roth Show. I'm your host, Yogi Roth. I appreciate you coming by the podcast, hanging out, giving us thoughts, and of course, listening and hopefully applying some of these conversations to your daily life. Now, today is really exciting because number one, it's almost college football season. I mean, how exciting is that? I love it. We just all went through all the media days, all the hype, all the pomp, circumstances, drama, and there hasn't even been one practice for the majority of teams around the country. Thus, everyone is undefeated, and the goals are as high as you can dream, and I absolutely love that. Also, today is the final episode of Season 4 of this podcast. We will be turning the page in August to Season 5. It will be heavy into college football coverage. I think you're really going to enjoy some of the early guests that we have when we talk about sports, humanity, and of course, what I believe is the greatest sport on planet Earth, college football. But today's guest, she did not play college football. She doesn't even work necessarily within college football directly. But I think we're all going to appreciate this because this is the time of year where we all kind of get excited, right? Think back to when you were a kid, you got a new backpack, some of us got a Trapper Keeper, you sharpened your pencil, you had your new outfit, school was starting, you wanted to feel good about yourself. I think even now as we get older, our internal clocks relatively shift and we want to feel good coming out of the summer, heading into the fall, and let's go attack whatever it is we're going to attack. And today's guest, she only knows how to attack. Her name is Anna Sparks. She's the CEO of Sparks Systems. Now, this is a company that's based in the Phoenix community in Arizona. And this company is a metabolic wellness company. And quite simply, it helps athletes reach their full potential through a science-based approach to nutrition and exercise. Now, I absolutely love that because we all should feel and have the opportunity to be our best. And I'd heard about Anna from a young man named Stuart Gill. Now, Stuart Gill, he ran all of my content over the last year or so. I try to create an apprenticeship every year, and it's been Max Brown, it's been Stuart Gill, it's been Katrina Kernachin, all athletically based students who were just recently graduated and are attacking their next venture in life. And Stuart introduced me to Anna, and he said, dude, you got to bring her on the pod. And he was right. Now, Anna, number one, she was a college athlete, and then she was a college coach. She coached a variety of different places, from Arkansas, the Lady Razorback soccer team, to also Arizona State. So there's a nice Pac-12 tie there. And I loved learning about her. She also was a professional cyclist. So she did her playing career and then became a professional, and then said, I'm still an athlete, and became a baller cyclist. And now she's really in tune with the body, health and wellness. So I went to her facility and literally put on a mask and literally went through the tests on the bike and tried to get myself to absolute exhaustion and competed as hard as I could and got my testing rates back and was able to understand my body in a different way. And I think for all of us, we're always trying to understand our body. And there's so many different tools now to go do it. And they're all beneficial in one way or another. But I found that Anna's and Spark System was really impressive. So as we kind of put a bow on the summer and kick off the fall, I wanted to kind of put a bow on Season 4. And I thought it was appropriate to talk about health, wellness on a bunch of levels, from being a male, former athlete, to being a current athlete right now, if you're a professional and you're in college, or even if you're a female. She talks about comparing people who have gone through rigorous races as well as women who go through pregnancy and how to train and prepare your body for that. So I think it puts a nice bow on Season 4. I have to give a big thanks and shout out to Stuart Gill. He moves on to the next venture in his life, and he took this podcast to another level. So thankful and appreciative to him, and of course, guiding me and Anna to meet one another. So I'm getting out of the way. This is Anna Sparks on the final episode of Season 4 on the Yogi Roth Show. Well, the podcast, you know how we do it. We like to go on the road very often. Been 8 countries, been to multiple states. First time we've been to the state of Arizona. Really? Fired up to be here, yes. Sitting across from me is the woman who just dominated me in this workout. I got my resting metabolic test, active metabolic test, and this is like the metabolic guru of all testing. She will improve your life. She's going to improve mine. We're going to break it down, and she's got a great story as an athlete and as a coach. Anna Sparks, thanks for joining the podcast.
Thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Totally. So we got a lot to talk about, and I don't want to totally take over your day. So we'll try to get you in and out. But first and foremost, because you have this amazing path to sport and performance, and here we are in Phoenix, and you've got this amazing hub. To me, I describe it as like wellness education. Like, we all as athletes want to learn about our bodies. Describe where we are, how it came to be, and what you do on a daily basis to help people better their lives.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, we are inside the Hub Fitness, located in Ahwatukee, which is actually just Phoenix, Arizona. And what I love about the Hub, where we are, is that they create this community. And we're all about creating community and making sure that people feel very supported. But a little bit about how we started Sparks is I'm an exercise physiologist. Did my undergrad in exercise science, master's in exercise physiology. And 3 years ago, I started Spark Systems. And Spark Systems is a health and performance coaching company that is differentiated by its metabolic testing. So we do baseline metabolic testing in order to create interventions from nutrition, movement, and breathing.
Wow. Okay. So nutrition, movement, and breathing. When you think back, you grew up I
grew up in Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Yeah, right. Fayetteville.
I'm a Southern girl.
So a lot of people know, like, Mitch Mustaine for the football people that listen to this, right? He's got a documentary on Amazon. I coach him at SC. But Fayetteville, Arkansas. When do you remember falling in love with movement?
Oh, wow. Gosh. Well, I fell in love with movement way before I started coaching. I was an avid soccer player since the age of 4. And I knew very early on that I wanted to play at the highest level possible. And so I trained and then ended up I moved to Georgia when I was 14 to play soccer for a club team in Georgia. And so my parents actually turned over legal guardianship of me, and I moved in with a family just so I could play soccer in Georgia for a coach and a team that was traveling all over the country. Soccer in Arkansas wasn't at the highest level. And so I wanted to go where I could play and have an opportunity to get an athletic scholarship. So I wanted to play soccer in college.
Wow. Okay. So, I'm in college football, and people often say about quarterbacks specifically that the art of being a multi-sport athlete has gone away. Kids are now having personal trainers at age 8, 9, 10, 14, 16, all the way up through, and I get them around 17 years old. I usually meet all the top guys in the country at the Elite 11. But I never heard of, in soccer, somebody who's, clearly you were a baller then, at 14, to have the wherewithal and the spatial awareness to be like, all right, I know I'm good. I want to have an opportunity to have a D1 scholar. Like, what is that even like? Like, I'd imagine you're the most mature 14-year-old in the history of soccer.
Maybe. I don't know. I just think that it all comes back to my parents. My parents were so supportive, and they were like, my dad told me really early on, you're special and you can do anything, and we're here to support you. So I was very driven. And I think I was probably maybe a little bit ahead of my age, but I just knew what I wanted. I knew what I wanted early on, and I wasn't scared to put the work in and be super committed and dedicated to that. And then I had these 2 incredible parents that just supported me every step of the way. And they never really said no, so they just allowed me to try.
That's amazing. I was just talking to my dad last week, and I went to Pennsylvania, and he said, Yogi, don't ever forget that your kids are on loan. Your job is to guide them to operate in the world on their own. Yeah. And here you are at 14, thriving. Most kids go to college and, I want to go crazy. I get to be free for the first time. Here you are at 14, you move to Georgia, and then you get a Scally. Yeah. And you drop into the SEC. How did you choose where you went, and what were your dreams like? I wonder at 14 if you were like, I'm going to go play pro and play in the World Cup. Was the path at that stage about going to college, or was it about trying to play somewhere?
Well, so when I was going to school, we had the Women's Pro League, which was called WUSA at the time. And actually, when I finished my senior season, I was going to go into the draft and try to go play professional.
In high school?
No, this was in college. So let's back up. So even before that, my main goal was to get a full ride to college. I told my parents early on, if you allow me to move to Georgia to play, then I'll get a full ride to college. And so they were like, okay, sure. And I would go, you won't have to pay a cent for my education. And so during that time, I started to be, I started getting recruited, started going on all my official visits, and I was like, I'm going West Coast. I've been in the South. I want to go West Coast. That's where all the big, soccer programs and stuff are. That's what I'm going to do. And then I moved to Georgia. And when I was in Georgia, my parents said, Anna, you've been gone now. You've been away from us for like 2 years. At least give us 1 year of college somewhere close to home that we can come and see you play. And I was like, they did give up a lot for me to be able to, move away at 14. And then, so I said, sure, okay. I took one visit to Ole Miss. And Ole Miss was only 6 hours from Fayetteville, Arkansas. And I really enjoyed my official visit there and just ended up deciding that, hey, I'd give them 1 year close to home and then I can always transfer. And I would transfer and maybe go out west. And so ended up my freshman year, we won the SEC West. We were really good and I was having a blast. And so 1 year turned into, I ended up graduating, played all 4 seasons, started every game of my college career. And Ole Miss, we ended up by my senior year, we were top 25 in the nation. And so then I started looking at, hey, maybe I go into the league and I try to play. And then that year, WUSA, which was the Women's Pro League at the time, ended up folding. And so I was dating a guy in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so I left Ole Miss, moved to Tulsa, and started actually coaching soccer at a high school, at a little preparatory school in Tulsa. And then decided that I wanted to go back for my master's degree. And so I actually applied for a graduate assistantship at Ole Miss and went back to the SEC, went back to Oxford, and I did my master's degree and was a graduate assistant strength and conditioning coach. So with Coach Cutcliffe, that was super fun, and that just set me up for like my education. I had my master's degree paid for as well. That was kind of my little bit of my journey there.
That's incredible. And here we are in Phoenix in this gym. You could hear some people in the background. It's totally alive. I want to stay on this topic of movement. And as an athlete, I think when we begin to move, we begin to understand our body. And when we begin to understand our body, we're like, whoa, there's something here. Or there's something not for people that aren't athletic. But people like yourself, clearly you were athletic. Clearly you knew you can get a Scali. You knew that your competitive temperament could get you there. And then you were like, well, this sport, this idea of movement, will actually get me a master's degree. Like, when did you start to piece together what sport could do for you post-playing? Because to me, that's the transition. Like, that is the space between where people thrive and say, whoa, my sport, football, baseball, basketball, soccer, field hockey, lacrosse, whatever, can launch me somewhere, or I can't believe I'm done playing, I'm lost my identity, I'm broke, I'm on drugs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. So I knew once I finished that senior season that I wanted to coach. I knew right away. And then when I went back for my master's degree and started coaching strength and conditioning, I'm like, oh, well, everything that I learned in the weight room, I could apply to myself when I was on the field. And then also everything that I was learning in the classroom when I was getting my master's, I could apply to myself, on the field and in the weight room. And so I'm like, well, hold on. I want to be able to teach other people how to do this. And all of the coaches that I had all the way through, I had the utmost respect for. I mean, they really were role models and mentored me and guided me, And so by the time I was finished with my master's degree, I started to apply for coaching jobs. And I actually applied for both strength and conditioning coaching jobs and soccer jobs. And so I remember in the same week, I interviewed at Elon College for strength and conditioning, and I interviewed at the University of Arkansas for their assistant soccer coaching job. And I remember coming home and talking to my dad, and my dad was like, well, what are you going to do? And I said, soccer's my passion. And so if I get that job at Arkansas, I'm going for it, and coming back, that would have brought me back to my hometown. And so when I went on that interview, and, Gordon Henderson was the head soccer coach at the time, and Gordon said, why wouldn't I hire a local girl that knows this area, knows all the clubs, knows how to recruit? And I'm like, wow. At 22, I just turned 22. I was the youngest coach in the SEC. And I had this huge opportunity, that really propelled me forward for what I'm doing now and really set me up for success. And I remember Gordon said, someone has to give you an opportunity. And he goes, and I want to do that. I think that you're going to be an incredible coach, and I want to help develop you. And so here at 22 years old, I'm coaching now girls that are seniors that I just played against when I was at Ole Miss. So now I'm coaching them at Arkansas, and they were the teams that, I was competing against just the season before.
That's really incredible. I don't know if you know this about me, but at the same age, I was 22, 23, I joined the staff at USC. And I moved to LA, and we're rolling. I mean, we were winning. We're top 4 in the country for 7 straight years. I mean, it was just epic. And LA, I know people love Alabama and the SEC and what they're doing in Georgia, and that's great. But, doing it in LA, it's a different world. I don't care what any of you guys say. You have no clue what it's like until you do it in Hollywood. But that being said, I remember being so young. And I have this theory about young coaches that, we coach. I'm curious if you'd agree with this. When we coach, it's this is the next best thing to playing. And I get to hang out with my squad. The people I used to play with or coach with or same age, and we're just kind of having fun, and we're in our 20s, and we don't have any money. Maybe we're all sleeping in the same room in the same apartment or sleeping on the floor at the office, but we're just in it. And then as we get older, we're like, oh, wow, I can make a little money in this thing. This is pretty cool. And then say you hit it and you're mid-30s and you're like, oh, I could be a head coach. You got that even earlier. But I'm curious if you at 22 were like, I want to be a coach because I want to influence the next generation of student athletes, or you were like, I'm just in it and I don't really know what the future holds, and let's just have some fun right now.
Probably the first year that I was at Arkansas, I didn't really know. And so I probably was that, I loved every moment of getting to hang out with the girls. I played with them in practice every day. I still was beating all of them at all the fitness tests, and that's how I got my respect, because I could jump in and do everything with them. And so that was pretty cool. But then Gordon, I remember him always saying to me, hey, now we got to start thinking on the next level, Anna. You're not a player anymore. And I was like, you're right. And I go, hey, but this is really cool, though, because I was doing all the recruiting. And so I'm going out and I'm meeting these kids and I'm meeting their parents. And I'm like, and now their parents are going to have to basically turn over legal guardianship to me to take care of their kid, for hopefully the next 4 years, And so that was the moment that things changed. And all of a sudden it became real to me that this isn't just, I'm not just a player anymore, this is put on your big girl pants, you're adulting now, and it was super cool. And so then I started laying out, well, what's my path? And so I thought I'll be at Arkansas. I was on what I would say the 3 to 5 year plan. And I'll be here for 3 to 5 years, and then I'll move on to another Division I school, hopefully a big Division I school. I'll be there for 2 to 3 years, and then I'll take a head coaching job at a decent-sized Division I school. And to be honest, being a female and having a master's degree and having that type of experience, I really felt that it would set me up really nicely to be in a good conference at a good school and have stability and be very successful.
So how do you get to Arizona State?
Yeah.
I mean, here I've spent a couple of days with Herm Edwards and the program here in spring football, and I learned that you were the head coach at ASU. How old are you?
Oh, no, I was the assistant.
Okay, you're the assistant.
Yeah.
How old were you when you got here?
So let's see. I was at Arkansas for 4 years. Okay. And then I got the call. At the time, the head coach at Arizona State was Kevin Boyd. And Kevin had just left. Let's see, he had been here for maybe 1 or 2 years, but he had come from Cal. And he came over and took the head job at ASU. And I had, whenever you're out recruiting, it's the same cast of characters week in and week out. So you get to meet all the different coaches from all over, the country, different conferences. And I had met Kevin. And I knew really nothing about Arizona State, but this job came open. And so I thought, I'll throw my name in and see. And I had met Kevin on the road, and I was like, I think it would be great to go and try this new conference as well. And plus, it was kind of in my plan, So I was at Arkansas those 4 years. And like I said, I was on the 3 to 5 year plan. And so ASU, at the time it was the Pac-10, huge conference. Okay, this is my next step. And so I came into ASU and met with Kevin. Kevin was awesome, and the girls were great. And I just jumped right in and got to work. And we had a great run here. But very soon, I just decided that I still wanted to be competitive myself. And so I got into, I started racing bicycles. And that was like, I remember Kevin going, what are you doing? Like, all your time, is spent like you're over here, riding your bike, and I go, well, it's actually making me better for you because I'm getting to like do these other things and still like kind of like, I wouldn't say express myself, but, things that I was really still passionate about. I still wanted to, compete, and the bike gave me that outlet,
I thought that was fascinating when the producer of this show, Stuart Gill, and I were talking about you finish playing, you go coach, and then you pick up another sport, like as a professional. Like it's usually the other way around. It's usually like coaching is like when you're like, all right, the wheels are falling off, I'm done. What is that like in your brain? We never turn off the competitiveness. I mean, I'm competing, I'm playing on riding your bicycle, half an hour ago, just getting my metabolic heart rate tested. But to join the professional ranks of a sport you, to my knowledge, did not compete in your entire life, you start from zero. Like, just take us inside the brain of the decisions. That's like we see with NFL players, I guess. A lot of times they play, they may be able to coach, and then all of a sudden they're like on the Olympic team in the luge, right? And you're like, how did this happen, right? But so for you, just how did that even begin to start?
Well, so like I said, I still have that desire to be competitive. And what's that outlet? Well, I had a huge engine from soccer. I would say that back when I was playing in the SEC, I was probably the fittest girl in the SEC. I could just run forever. And so it translated on the bike, And so when I picked up the bike, I started out doing actually triathlons. And I started doing triathlons because my advisor in college, Ed Acevedo, when I was at Ole Miss, he was like, I remember he goes, Anna, you've got these huge legs and huge ass from playing soccer. Like, you should ride a bike. I bet you would be good. And I was like, I've never really ridden a bike. I mean, not like that. And he goes, actually, like, why don't you do triathlon? And so I go, well, could you help me? And he was like, sure. So we borrowed a bike and I started riding this bike. And he was like, whoa, you're actually pretty good at this. And I was like, huh. So he took me to do my first triathlon. It was out in Sardis Lake in Mississippi. And I didn't have any like clip-in pedals or anything, I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never swam in open water before. And I just remember thinking it was a lake. And I'm like, if I could just get to that first buoy, I could hold on and I could rest. I was like, I'm tapped, And so I get out and I get on the bike and, again, I had the fastest transition because I didn't have to change shoes. I didn't have to do anything. I just, put my running shoes on and got on my bike and went and then ran, and I ended up winning. And I thought, well, if I actually trained for this, maybe I could do better, And so Ed Acevedo took me to my next triathlon in Philadelphia, Mississippi, and I ended up winning that one too. And I'm like, maybe there's something to this. But I always had the running because that was easy from soccer. But the biking, I was like, whoa, now this is fun. I can go hard and I can go fast on this bike. So that was kind of how it all started.
And then, so when does it become serious? Like, how did you balance coaching? Did you have to make a decision of, okay, I'm going to really roll for this? Because at some point your career takes a nice little pivot.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I ended up deciding, okay, I got a call one day from a guy that I started kind of dabbling after the triathlon into some bike racing where it was just solely bike racing, like no running, no swimming, nothing like that. And I was doing road racing and I was starting to do really well. And I actually ended up getting called from this guy who had a women's professional team. And he said, "Hey, Anna, I've seen your results in some of these races, and I'd like to, talk to you about maybe coming and riding for our team, signing a contract." I'm like, I got a full-time job, I'm like, I don't really know. I can't even, I'm trying to even remember how old I was at that time, but I was like, I don't know about this. And he was like, "Well, let me know you're doing really good." And right about that time, I get called into the Olympic Training Center. And then I got called back by that same guy again and got picked up by this women's pro team. And so I go, you know what? I've got enough money put away that even if I just do this 1 year, I can pay my mortgage. And if I don't make a cent, it's fine, And so I did. I left my job and I went all in with this bike racing. And 1 year turned into 6 years that I raced in the women's professional peloton. And it was a blast. It was so much fun. I got to travel the world, racing bikes. And I got to meet so many people. Well, within that time, I still had to make money because it's not like women professional cyclists make a ton of money. And so I started coaching other cyclists, mountain bikers, triathletes, runners, and everything I did coaching-wise was all based off of metabolic testing. And that metabolic testing, I knew all about it from when I was in exercise phys. And so that's kind of how everything. Now I'm traveling the world, racing bikes, but I'm able to coach all of these athletes by the phone, over the internet, because I had all of their numbers, because when I was in town, I would test all of them. And then I was able to put together what their training programs needed to look like, what their nutrition programs needed to look like to make sure that it was supporting their training. And it was super fun. And I was able to support myself.
That's fascinating. So I'm curious, when you called home and you were like, "Dad, 14, you let me leave for soccer. I had this plan. I've chased this plan. I'm on the pinnacle of being a head coach. Bye-bye. I'm going to go chase this next dream." What was that?
Oh, man. They were a little bit apprehensive, not going to lie. But I remember my dad saying, he goes, "You're going to do what you want to do." And,
you think?
And my mom would say, "And you're going to be successful at it because you'll go all in." And I was like, okay, again, we're super supportive. If this is what you want to do, it's definitely taking you off your path. Anna, you've written it out exactly what it looks like. And now we're deviating. And I was like, yeah, but I can always go back into coaching. I said, I can always go back. I plan to just do this 1 year, And like I said, that 1 year turned into where I was still able to make money and support myself, but I had this grand adventure, and I did something really, really cool that really fed my soul,
That's fascinating. Like 1 year turned into 6, turned into now a career with Spark System and your whole company, which I want to talk about. But I just think that, I think athletes are guaranteed 2 things in life. I think we're allowed to love something because we've loved the ball. I slept with football for 15 years, as sad as that sounds, right? Or you fell in love with a soccer ball and then a bike. And we have instinct, and we can trust our instinct, right? As a soccer player, you weren't like, "I'll set her up and do da-da-da." You just went, boom. As a receiver, I never said, "I'll go 1, 2, 3, then break the route off inside." I just went, boom, and away you went. And I think those things get lost as you get away from your competitive playing days. You lose the fact that you have this amazing ability to love, whether it's a person or whether it's another craft. And I think sometimes when our instinct is screaming at us, pivot in your life, chase your passion. We're like, nah, I'm going to do what's safe. Did you have that inner dialogue for yourself? Because there's one consistent theme throughout this whole thing is that you play big. You leave home at 14, you choose to go coach, you choose to enter strength and conditioning, a male-dominated field. You go big. And I'm wondering what that self-talk was like for you at those stages. And then here you are, a startup company that you want to brand and begin to give back a lot of the knowledge that you've gained.
Yeah. So So I will say that inner dialogue, and that instinct too, like, I didn't think about it. I just went for it, and I will say, I actually told someone this the other day and this kind of goes back to your question that you were saying when you were a player to a coach and making that transition, right? So I remember back when I was at Ole Miss playing, and I would go out to the training ground, and our coach would say, hey, the topic today is going to be, attacking in the attacking third of the field is what we're doing. And he would set up a drill. He would set up some cones, and he would say, okay, now I need you guys to connect so many passes, and that equals a goal. And then he would open the cones up, and now he would say, okay, now I need you to connect so many passes, and then you can have a shot on goal. And then by the end of the training session, he would take all of the cones away, and he would say, okay, now we're going to goal, and there's this many players on the field, blah, blah, blah. And I remember like going, hold on, how many passes do I need to connect in order for it to be a goal? I didn't even hear anything about this is working on that he's trying to set up a scenario in this drill for what I'm going to see on Saturday or on Friday night when the lights come on and we're playing against Auburn, right? I just knew I wanted to win that drill, right? I didn't see the bigger picture of it, and what he was trying to accomplish. And then by moving the cones out wider, now he's giving us more space, and now it's getting even more realistic, more game-like, And then when I became a coach, I'm like, oh, hell, he was doing that the whole time. Like, now I get it. Now I see the progression. But as I was growing up, and for the longest time, I just wanted to win the drill. I'm like, tell me what I need to do, and I'm going to get that done, And so then as I, have moving into having my own company and all of that, now, like, I have to be able to look and really connect the dots of what I really want, my life to look like, what I want, how many people. I feel like I have knowledge and skills to really have a big impact on the world. And I can't wait to talk about, Spark Systems to everybody, and really like get the word out there, because I now feel like I finally have connected the dots. So.
And we need people like you, right? I mean, I think I love the idea of progression-based learning. When I teach high school quarterbacks offensive football, we talk about it at the Elite 11, which is the quarterback camp I'm a part of. That's how we teach. Mm-hmm. And I think as athletes, we're progression-based learners, and sometimes about our bodies, when our careers are over, we have to learn the hard way, right? And all of a sudden, we've got diabetes, right? All of a sudden, we need a knee replacement. All of a sudden, whatever it is, our blood pressure's through the roof, anxiety, depression, all of those things, because we need to learn the hard way. That's, I think, an athletic mindset to a large degree. Mm-hmm. And here you are connecting the dots to potentially prevent, or I don't know how you do it, but reverse some of these health issues that athletes have and just humans have. So how did you realize that you had something special in Spark System? And then take us through what we just did, because I just was on a bicycle. I had a mask on. You'll see pictures of it on the website and on Instagram. But I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew you were recording a lot of intel, and now you're going to give me a lot of answers.
Yes. Well, let me start with your first question about like how I realized that this really applies to everybody. So like I said, I was coaching a lot of cyclists, mountain bikers, triathletes, and runners. And I would always start with this metabolic test. So I would bring them in. I would do a resting metabolic test just like you did. So I would have them sit quietly in a chair, mask on their face, collecting their expired gases. And I would be able to tell them exactly how many calories they needed every day just for brain function. And of those calories, what's coming from fat and what's coming from carbohydrate. And then I would move them onto a bike or a treadmill, and I would do their active metabolic test. And I would be able to tell them what they're utilizing for fuel when they are exercising. I would be able to tell them at the exact heart rate in which they change over from utilizing fat to utilizing carbohydrate. So one day I am I'm testing a guy that I'm coaching, and he actually is a primary care doctor. And he's an athlete himself, and he's training for a race in Utah, like a 200-mile bike race. And so he comes in, he does his resting test, he does his active test, his bike test. And then I'm going over all of his data, and he says, Anna, how can I get this in my clinic? My patients are living longer, but their quality of life is so poor. How can I get your system, your program into my clinic? And I went, I've been doing this for the last 10 years for athletes, but it applies to everyone. And so literally went out like within that month and bought all of the equipment, and we started testing in his clinic. And so here I go from testing a population that is very motivated, a lot of athletes, right? Very motivated. You give them this data and you give them that plan, and they execute, and they see performance gains instantly. And they also see life gains, right? Like they are recovering, improved, they're sleeping better. All of these, everything's just getting better, right? But I don't really have to do a ton with them except tell them, hey, this is what you do, and then they go execute. Well, the opposite was happening when we were in the clinic. We are seeing now a lot of type 2 diabetics. We're seeing a lot of overweight, a lot of hypertension, high cholesterol. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these people are so sick. How did they get this way? Like, how did this happen? And I go, you know what? My goal, I need to educate the kids. I need to go back to the kids, because if I can have an impact on these kids' lives and start to educate them early on the benefits of proper nutrition, the proper movement, the proper breathing. And when I say breathing, I'm talking about to manage stress and anxiety, right? I'm like, that's going to be my goal. That's the goal of Spark Systems. I'm going to have to start with these kiddos. And so then I started actually thinking about it, and I'm going, hold on. I think I need to take it one step further, and I need to actually address the pregnant moms, because that pregnant mom has a direct impact on that fetus. Mm-hmm. And if we can have better outcomes, and make sure that pregnant mom throughout, while she is carrying that child, that she has the proper nutrition, the proper movement, the proper stress management, then we're going to have better outcomes, not only in, labor and delivery, but setting them up for postpartum. But actually now that kid is not going to develop that type 2 diabetes, that metabolic syndrome, And so I will say that right now with our company, we are working with a lot of people that are very sick, and we're still working with a lot of athletes as well. But my ultimate goal will be to eventually be able to really put together a solid program for these pregnant moms in order to, because I think that's how we're going to change the world.
Wow. Yeah. I didn't know that part of this,
yeah,
of what drives your business. That's amazing. That's power. I mean, knowledge is that. What made you go there? What made that become
so kind of cool?
Yeah.
So I was coaching a female mountain biker, and I was coaching her for an event that she was doing in Colorado called the Leadville 100 mountain bike. And it's a difficult experience because it's at 10,000 feet, right? So the altitude, but still 100 miles on a mountain bike. I mean, there's truckloads of climbing, all this. Anyway, so send her out there, and I tell her exactly where I would like her heart rate to be, what I want her power output, average power output to be, and all this stuff. But I get all of her heart rate data, and for this, and she does it in 10 and a half hours. And I actually come back home to Phoenix, and I've got this this perinatal doctor that I had been working with that was coming in and doing our program for himself. And I said, hey, doc, do you mind? Could you give me heart rate data for a 10 and a half hour labor and delivery? And he was like, what do you want? I can probably find something, but he was like, I don't understand where you're going with this. I said, just give it to me. And when I put those on a slide next to each other, my Leadville 100 female mountain biker, 10 and a half hours, and then this 10 and a half hour labor and delivery, you see that it's so similar.
Wow.
And so what I began to realize was, hold on, we need to think about labor and delivery differently. We need to think about that we need to prepare these women for an event. And that event is labor and delivery. And we need to be treating these women almost like an athlete. Just instead of saying, hey, you've got 9 months, until you have the most traumatic event of your life, just go sit over there. Here's, maybe have 300 extra calories a day, and then we're just going to hope for the best in 9 months' time. And then also you may put on a lot of weight, you may be pretty depressed, and then you're going to have this baby and you don't even know your body anymore. You don't even know yourself. You're depressed, And so I'm like, we really need to put together a program that is really addressing this, that standard of care for these women. And I want to do that, like I go, this is how we change what I call, epigenetics. But we have to start. We have to start with that pregnant mom if we want to change this.
And have you seen that? Have you worked with some?
So I've worked with few, which I would love to have truckloads of these women come through.
Let's go.
I know. And so that's why I'm on this, why I'm talking to you too, because if you know of women that are pregnant currently, it would be great, because I would love to start gathering the data so that we can do the research and put together a really, a program that really supports these women, but also some women that are maybe struggling to conceive. This works for them. Say that I had a friend that was going in to do like in vitro, because they were really struggling to get pregnant. And so I said, why don't you utilize our program first before you go and do, this in vitro, and let's see if we can try to help you conceive naturally before, and as a last ditch effort before you go and start doing, these hormones and stuff. And so she came in, we worked together, we addressed her nutrition, we optimized her blood sugar, and they ended up conceiving naturally. And so that was massive, that was huge. And now that's just one person. Like I haven't been able to do this on multiple people, but I would like to. I'd like to be able to work with these women, even if they don't end up conceiving naturally. Their bodies are now healthy enough to take on those fertility drugs, and I think that's huge. So now their chances are increased even more that it may work,
Yeah, this is beautiful. I mean, if you think about, one of my mentors, the guy who's been on this podcast, his name is Kevin Carroll. You'd love him. He has this book called The Rules of the Red Rubber Ball, and it's all about chasing your passion. And at some point in our life, to some people, maybe a passion is developing a family. And we have this thought, I think, as kids, as teenagers, we're like, all right, I'll get married at like 22 to my high school sweetheart after college. Or maybe it's like, no, 30, or I'm going to wait till I'm 40. Whatever our vision is, we have one. But very rarely do we prepare in the way that you're describing. Kevin would always say, yo, you got to be in beta. You always got to be working. That's what he tells me. He's in my board of life. Love that man. But on that note of like, you got to be working, right? You can't just turn on the health kick when, yep, you're type 2 diabetic, right? Or you have major whatever, high blood pressure, or struggling to conceive. Like, I think there's something there of like, hey, we all vision cast and put out our vision boards and say our dreams, and I love all that. But I think there's some great concrete work that you're doing and guiding and leading that I never heard of, at least, that could help people, even if it's that singular focus of getting pregnant or having a healthy lifestyle, right, or reversing diabetes. I didn't know I was going to walk into this conversation today. And my mind's pretty excited about what you're doing, because this whole podcast is exploring the only question, which is, what does it mean to be human? And a lot of people, to be human means to grow and elevate and create humanity, whether it's for yourself or for others. And you're literally living that.
It's pretty cool. And I will say this, that, even though when we work with, athletes and they come in and they're like, can you help me better my performance? And I'm like, absolutely. What does that look like to you? Well, I want to put out X amount of watts on the bike. Can you get me there? For sure, I can do that. But I know in the back of my mind, and what I try to relay to them is that really, though, it's all about longevity. I'm going to make you healthier. And a byproduct of that is that you're going to be able to put out that amount of wattage, that amount of power on the bike. But ultimately, I'm setting you up for success for longevity. And longevity is going to be health span plus lifespan, right? So health span being the quality of those years, lifespan being in the number of those years. And if they aren't pulling, like I use Dr. Peter Attia, which actually I think he's out in maybe out in LA, but he talks about longevity, and he says, people that live to be 100 years old, they still die of the same things that people at 50 and 60 die of, but they live to be 100 because they pulled the right levers early on to not develop those things until later in life, right? So, and those things being cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, cardiovascular disease, those things, they didn't develop it until late in the game because they pulled the right levers early on. And I look at those levers as the proper nutrition, the proper movement, the proper breathing, stress management, and then that sense of purpose, that sense of self, right?
My parents would love you. We grew up vegetarians. And even my now fiance, I'll never forget, she came to our house, and it was my brother and dad were there. I was pumped. I was like, we're going to make dinner for you. It was like the first kind of family meeting. This is almost 2 years ago. And we came over, and I made a salad. It was like my pride and joy, right? And she's like, hey, do you have any dressing? We're like, no. And I didn't grow up with ever dressing ever in our house. We had a little oil and vinegar maybe, but I didn't even like that.
That's awesome.
And she's Korean, so it's like Spice Central where her house is, and everybody has different diets. But I remember her mom said, "She goes, I bet your insides are really clean," And as a kid, all I wanted was to be like everybody else. Mom, how come I don't have fruit roll-ups in my diet? And we have this holistic dried apricot that I have to eat, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, throughout our entire diet. But what they did is they pulled the right levers. Whether or not my siblings or myself want to continue to pull them is now our choice as adults. But they set trends where I don't have an appetite for a burger. Not that that's bad, but that lever was never pulled for me as a kid, and I see it now where I'm 37. I feel like I'm 17. I feel like
kudos
I still move.
To your parents. That is so. I love hearing that. Right, and so a lot of times though, it is about educating the parents. So when I told you back when I kind of had that epiphany of I don't want to see this in the clinic, what I'm seeing later in life, so I need to educate the kids. Well, I then realized I started working with a ton of soccer players, a ton of young soccer players. And I really, though, had to have their parents there the entire time because their parents are the ones that are buying the food. And their parents need to know, too, because a lot of times they think they're doing the right thing, but they don't really know what the right thing is. And so they've got really good intentions. And so I just felt like they needed to be educated. So kudos to your parents for, it's huge. It's great. I think about, I had a lady that actually works with me. She's one of our metabolic health coaches. And she said that she has a daughter that is 13. And one day her daughter comes home from soccer practice with the carpool. And she's carrying a big Dutch Brothers, and it's got all kinds of Cool Whip, mocha frappolata, whatever thing, right?
Yep. Oh yeah.
And she comes out, and my friend that works for me, she sprints out to the car and says to the parent that's driving, said, "Listen, I know that it's okay that you that you want to do this, that you wanted to do something really nice for my kid and for your kid, and that you bought, but we don't do this in our house. We don't have these types of things, and so I really appreciate the gesture, but please don't give this to my kid. She's going to be, hopped up on all this sugar, we're doing the best that we can, and so I just don't typically allow her to have these things. And I was like, wow, that was gutsy, she's like, just don't, I know that you were trying to do the right thing, but my kids don't need this. We're trying to set them up for success.
Wow. You are doing just brilliant work. Okay. So I don't know if my test scores were brilliant or not.
Oh yeah.
But, what happened? I walked in to paint a picture of everybody. I sat down. We met each other, had some pleasantries, and I sat in a chair, put on this mask, and breathed for about 10 minutes. And you garnered some sort of results from that to be baseline. That's kind of what I assumed. And then I got a bicycle and went as hard as I could at a bunch of different speeds. So makes some sense to some people that are like, yes, I want to have a healthier lifestyle. I may want to get pregnant. What do you do when somebody comes in the first time they meet you?
Cool. Okay, so what we always start out with is that resting metabolic test. And again, like I said earlier in our interview, a resting metabolic test is going to tell me exactly how many calories you need every day just for brain function, just for survival, right? So, and right now we need, do you mind? Do you want me to talk specifics?
Yeah, let's go big. I'm wide open.
So Yogi right now needs right around 1,976 calories every day minimum just for survival.
Right around 1,976. That's a great number.
So from that though, what we have found is that actually of those 1976, 73% of those calories right now are coming from fat. And 25% is coming from carbohydrate. Okay. So what this means is that right now, just by you sitting here, you're actually able to utilize your internal fat stores, which is a really good thing. Okay. So our goal typically when we look at these percentages, these ratios of fat to carbohydrates at rest, our goal would be around that 70-30 range. Okay. So this is good. You're exceeding that.
Okay, yeah.
Awesome.
I think anytime somebody sees 73% fat, you're like, oh no.
No.
What's going on?
So it's really good. Okay, so let's talk about that, what that means too. So we have 2 fuel tanks, all right, that we get energy from. And those 2 fuel tanks are going to be fat and carbohydrate, okay? So carbohydrate, it's a really small tank. We can actually only store about 1,300 to 1,500 calories of glycogen, which carbohydrate, right? And we store it in that small tank, and that's stored in our liver and in our muscle. Okay. And that's a really quick burning fuel. You blast through it very, very fast. Okay. But then we have this huge tank, which I would call your fat tank, right? It's kind of like diesel fuel, right? And we can store about, 50 to 80K, even the leanest person would still store about 30K worth of fat in their cells. Okay. So I'm not talking necessarily about like the fat on your butt, or on your stomach. I'm talking about the internal fat stores. All right. But due to the standard American diet and also having a plethora of food around us all of the time and having all this access to food, typically people will just utilize that small tank all the time, right? And so you can think about your body like a refrigerator, Every time you put something in, right, you use a little bit as energy, but then you store, like you're putting it in the fridge to store. So every time you put something in your mouth, you use a little bit of it as energy right then, and then you store the rest. And you typically will store that in your fat cells, right? So what we would like to do is be able to tap into that natural metabolic state and be able to use that fat tank all of the time, right? And so right now, this is good, seeing this at rest, that you're actually able to tap into those fat stores at rest.
Okay. I like that. All right,
so
that's why I'm not even moving. I'm just kicking it.
Yeah, you're laying in bed, or maybe you're just up, sitting up in a chair, just your heart's beating, you're breathing, Okay. Okay. And so then we actually put you onto a bike, and what we're looking at is to see what are you utilizing for fuel when you start exercising. Okay. And so now you had a heart rate monitor strap on, so we can see, okay, as we increase the intensity of that bike, what is his heart rate doing? And then also by having that mask on your face, collecting your expired gases, we're able to see, okay, at what intensities is he utilizing what for fuel? Is he utilizing fat at a certain heart rate? Is he utilizing carbohydrate? And what is that point in which he changes over from utilizing fat to utilizing carbohydrate? Okay. So that's a huge point, by the way, right? We call that your metabolic efficiency point. And that metabolic efficiency point is one that we want that to be to take place at the highest intensity possible, right? Because what does that mean? That means that you go out for a run and say that right now your metabolic efficiency point is actually at 97 beats per minute. So if you go out on a run and once your heart rate is at or below 97, we're maximizing fat utilization then. But once you go over that 97, we're now trending towards carbohydrate, right? So our goal would be to actually move that metabolic efficiency point to the right and have you hit that at higher intensities, right? So at a higher heart rate.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
So if it was at like 110,
yeah.
So that means I'm working harder, I'm breathing harder, but I'm not tapping into my carbohydrates.
Got it.
Yeah,
because you're not tapping into that small tank, right? Yeah. So now we can utilize those internal fat stores for fuel, right?
So how is 97 on the scale?
Well, so this is all based off of your own individual metabolism, right? So I couldn't say that how you compare to, to anyone else in your age range, right?
Bolt.
Huh?
Usain Bolt, right? Okay, all right.
But actually, Usain Bolt is his he's very, very metabolically efficient. And he actually, he doesn't tap into those carbohydrate stores for very, very long into the game.
And do you want to not tap into them, or do you want to just do that at your peak?
So it would be awesome if you could go through an entire race or an entire event and actually not go into those.
Really? Because I hear that
stores.
And I would think then you didn't go for it. You didn't work hard. Your heart didn't get moving as much as it should have.
Well, so no, you don't look at it that way. We look at it as efficiency. Okay. So efficiency is going to be, I look at it on the bike, efficiency as power per heart rate. So I want to be putting out the maximum amount of watts I can at the lowest heart rate possible. And that equals efficiency, right? And so that's what we want when we talk about metabolic efficiency. We want you to be able to be doing as intense of workout as possible, but being able to just utilize those internal fat stores, right? And so how do we do that? How do we increase metabolic efficiency? So how do you move that metabolic efficiency point from a 97 to a 110? Well, 75% of the game is going to be your daily nutrition. 25% of the game would actually be movement or exercise. Okay.
There we go.
Yeah.
That's light bulb moment.
So what we need to know is your daily nutrition supporting your activity? Okay. And so referencing back to saying that there's a plethora of food around us all the time. And so what happens is that since people have access to all this food, they're constantly eating. And so they're constantly in what we call the fed state. Okay. So what that means is that typically, depending upon what they're eating, the composition of their meals, and if it's higher in carbohydrate, then their body's going to go to that carbohydrate for fuel right away. Okay. And when they go to that carbohydrate, when they eat that carbohydrate meal, you have to think too, they get a blood sugar response from that carbohydrate. And so when blood sugar goes up, then insulin has to be released from the pancreas and it has to come and it's trying to bring that blood sugar back down. So when you wake up in the morning, you typically would have 1 teaspoon of sugar, right, circulating through your blood. And so moment you get out of bed, you're like, I need to eat. I'm awake. I got to eat something. I'm hungry, and whether you really are hungry or not, you're in the habit of waking up and eating. And so say that you eat something that's higher in carbohydrate. So you eat oatmeal and a banana, right? You have a blood sugar response. So blood sugar now goes from that 1 teaspoon. Now you have a spike. So insulin's released. It comes in. It starts to try to bring it back down. Well, you weren't really satiated from that oatmeal and banana. And so you're like, I got to eat again. And so you eat a granola bar. Well, blood sugar goes back up again. More insulin is released to try to bring the blood sugar back down. And then you're like, oh, I'm hungry again. I've got all this food here. It's time to eat lunch. So you eat a sandwich and a bag of chips. Blood sugar goes back up. Insulin comes back out, right? And so now if you think about it, that happens all day long. You're staying in this elevated insulin state. Well, what does that cause?
Your pancreas got to keep working.
Causes insulin resistance, right? Yeah. And it'll eventually start causing weight gain because every time that insulin is released, right, at some point those cells are going to go, hey, I can't take anymore. No more insulin can come in. Well, then, and it's all in your blood now. and then it's going to be stored. That insulin then is stored as fat. And so now we do get those love handles. We do get that big belly,
Heart attack.
And yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Wow.
So you can think that a lot of people that come in to see us, yes, maybe they do move, a lot, but maybe they don't. And maybe they can really only do just the resting test because they are so, ill, or disease that they can't even do the active test. So if we just address their daily nutrition, then the next time they come in, now we can actually do an active metabolic test, right? So with you, we want to increase that metabolic efficiency point. So now when you go out and you do your run and say we get it to 110, say that you're training and you're staying at or below 110, you're just utilizing fat. And that means you don't have to take on anything. You don't need to be replenishing with anything because your body's utilizing what's stored. Yeah. Super cool, right?
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So people are and it's like really liberating as well to know like you don't have to have all of this food, all these gels and snacks coming in all the time because your body is very efficient at utilizing what's on board.
Yeah, we haven't. It's like the Buddha would say, like you already have enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like.
I like
wow.
it.
Okay.
I like it. Okay,
right.
So then the next point that we go down to is that aerobic threshold. And right now you hit your aerobic threshold at 117 beats per minute, right? And that's basically telling us what is your aerobic makeup? What does your foundation look like, Because we want to make sure we can't build a tall house unless we have a large foundation. And so with anybody, really making sure that aerobic foundation is really large and then we can go up from there. So really like when you're talking about athletes, regardless of what type of athlete they all need to start with having a massive aerobic foundation, and we need to build that. And it takes some time, right? But once it's in place, that top end comes very easily. We can actually see a lot of speed gains then. And so, looking at your aerobic threshold, we give you, a goal for the next time that you come in too, that we want to see it increase. And again, how do we increase it? 75% of that is going to be addressing that daily nutrition, and 25% is going to be the actual movement, right? Does that make sense? Yeah?
Yeah. So basically I want to be able to be at a higher level of fit. I want to be able to have more beats per minute at a higher level, or at a higher number of beats per minute based on my diet and based on
right. Well, based off of your nutrition and your movement, the movement strategies, so we would have you exercise at a certain intensity in order to bump that aerobic threshold up.
Right. So
okay.
Like more, like I hear that and I'm like, okay, more cross training.
Yes.
Right.
You can do more cross training.
Right.
Yes. And also on here, I've given you what your training zones are.
Oh, hello.
And so now you'll know exactly when you go out and do any of these workouts, you'll know what those workouts are going to elicit for you, right? Are we building that aerobic threshold? The next point down is the lactate threshold, or are you spending a lot of time at or above that lactate threshold, right?
That's a good point. I think as athletes, you're always like, just push. Like I got capacity, I can go hard, but like you're always sore, right? It's like when like somebody rubs or I rub my own IT band, I'm always like, oh my God, that hurts so much. But it's probably because I haven't really recovered. I've done the same movement in a yoga class and hold the same pose or whatever it is for too long.
Yes. And so when you spend a ton of time in what we call above that lactate threshold, you're now moving from aerobic metabolism as well to anaerobic metabolism. It takes you a lot longer to recover from those efforts. And if you're doing that day after day after day, you're just digging yourself a hole. But most people, if they don't know what that lactate threshold is, then they don't know that every day they go out, they may think that they're exercising aerobically, but they're actually anaerobic all the time. And so now they're in a state of being overtrained. They're not sleeping well. They're never recovering, right? And they're really maxing out their physiology, They're never going to get better. They're just going to plateau. And we get a lot of athletes like that too. They just are like, I've just plateaued. Can you help me? And it's like, yes, absolutely. But we have to first gather some data and see where you're at. And then we'll put together that plan for you. So, and then the next point down, we actually took you all the way to your max, and your VO2 max, like, you got a good engine. Yeah.
That's what's up.
Yeah.
You
were pushing pretty hard there at the end. And I know you were you were at 280 watts at your max, which is great. Yeah. And you were really trying for that 300.
Yeah, I was frustrated. Yeah. I wanted to get that. But what does that even mean?
So a VO2 max is going to be the maximum amount of oxygen you can consume that goes to the working muscles. Okay. So it actually gives us a representation of what does your engine look like? Like, how big is your engine? Some of us are very suited for, have really big engines that are suited for endurance. And some maybe have smaller engines, but but can work on speed and, fast, things. But you've got a good engine. Like, you would be really good at actually doing some more endurance stuff, endurance sports or any activity that you really wanted to do. Your VO2, your engine size, your physiology is not limiting you at all. Like, you've got a really good engine.
Yeah. I don't get tired that often. Like, when I go on aggressive workouts, I've always been that way.
But also remember, Yogi, though, like, when you're looking at being metabolically efficient, you need to keep in mind, it's not about no pain, no gain. Right. It's about being smart, right? And actually training to increase that efficiency, Yeah,
and that's the theme, right? I mean, the efficiency is exactly, like, I just got done hanging out with Herm Edwards, and he's like, we're building a program that's efficient. We're not going to be at practice for 3 hours like other teams around the country. We're not going to stay here as coaches till midnight just to say that we did. Like, we are in and we are out, and we are at our best all the time, and that's how we remain sharp. And I think what I'm hearing this from getting my heart rate when I'm sitting down, to understanding my metabolic efficiency point, to the aerobic threshold, to the lactate threshold that I have, to my VO2 max. Like, it's all about learning my body and understanding where the thresholds are, and then what do I need to do from a nutrition standpoint and a workout standpoint or movement standpoint to be the most efficient version of me, not the most lean, mean, crazy athlete, but just the sharpest, like you said off the top, to maximize my brain power. I think is absolutely, you probably said a way cooler word than that, but
I like brain power.
Yeah, but to be my sharpest, I have to be efficient. I deal with that as a broadcaster, traveling 4 flights a week, being tired on the weekends, and a lot of people, I think we burn out, we go too hard, we got home life, work life, we want to have some fun, and the recovery is just like, oh, whatever, I'm just tired. And it's almost like a badge of honor of, like, I'll just take another venti latte and I'm cool. We're just killing ourselves, literally.
Yes, absolutely. We work with actually quite a few top executives, and they're high performers. I mean, we treat them just as athletes, and you think that they need to be prepared. They're walking into a board meeting where they're making million, if not billion-dollar decisions. And if their mental acuity is not spot on, then, whoa, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of stuff that's going down. And so we have to really address their daily nutrition. We have to make sure that we're maximizing their recovery and that they're sleeping well. All the magic happens in sleep, by the way, right? And so we track all of that for them as well. And so that we can see, they're going to walk into that meeting, are they really on their A game? We work with them on breathing techniques so that they can utilize that diaphragmatic breathing, which you're super familiar with the yoga that you do, right? What that does is that you're utilizing your respiratory rate, your breathing, to calm your brain. And so, just a quick tip, you start to feel yourself getting anxious, start breathing, really expel that CO2. And when you breathe out, it's a buffer for that, essentially that lactic acid accumulation. It's not really lactic acid, but that's what people will, they'll understand. And so when you're actually breathing out and you are buffering, then your brain can stay calm longer. And so before you walk into do a, production, like, do some belly breathing, calm yourself down, and you'll find that all of a sudden, like, you can reset. You can bring those stress levels way down. And we actually have been looking at, like, even we have a pulse oximeter on our machine, and we look at O2 saturation levels. And so we'll have somebody come in and we'll see what their pulse ox is. And then we actually will teach them how to do that diaphragmatic breathing. And then we'll continue to monitor their oxygen saturation. And it's just going up,
Okay, so help me out here. I'll get you out here pretty quick, I promise. The end of the college football season, right? I'm on the road for probably 20 straight weeks. You're rolling, right? And anybody who hustles a lot or is exhausted sometimes, they're going to relate to this. My season ended, and I remember having the specific phone call with the guy I referenced earlier, Kevin Carroll. He goes, "How was the year?" And I said, "I'm exhausted and depleted." And he goes, "Being exhausted's cool, man. Like, you could be tired. Like, you went for it. But you can't be depleted anymore. Like, you got a family now. Like, you gotta show up. Like, you can't just take 2 weeks and be solo yogi in Bali," which is usually what I do, something like that after the season. So I say that I've reflected back on my year, being like, okay, football season around the corner. I can't be depleted. Like, what are my habits like? So can you coach me up to make sure at the end of the season, like, I could be tired, but I can't be depleted. Like, I was a zero. And I felt kind of proud of it. I was like, I left it on the grass, man. But it's not a good place to be, because it took me a while to recover from that. Like, I'm just recovering from football season now, and we're a couple months after the year, and I know that about my body. Like, it just needed to recover. So what can I do so I'm not there? Because I don't want to be exhausted and depleted ever again.
Absolutely. And that's our main goal, is to make sure that your daily nutrition is supporting your life, right? And by optimizing blood sugar, you're never going to get to that depleted state. When you came in and did this test, and we have legit numbers on you, and this won't be the last time that you come in and get tested, because we're going to give you the proper nutrition plan, the proper movement plan, the proper breathing plan, right? In order to make sure that you have the tools in your toolbox to go through the season and not be depleted. We're going to make sure that you are sleeping well, even though, hey, it may be limited time that you actually do get to sleep, right? We're going to make sure we're maximizing that. Just like the coach said today in practice, we want to make sure it's quality over quantity, right? We're going to optimize you, and by creating that metabolically efficient human being, then you're never going to be depleted again. It's a lifestyle. This isn't a fad diet, nothing like that. This is a lifestyle. We're going to give you the tools to operate for the rest of your life, in order to increase longevity. Because what you've been doing you're not pulling the right levers. Even though your food and stuff was, if you're not sleeping, you're not recovering, you're not, producing producing melatonin that keeps you asleep, and your habits are poor. Alcohol, doing any things that when you go on the road, and it's not saying that all of that stuff has to go, but when you start to understand what it feels like to feel good, we all deserve the opportunity to feel awesome every day. And so by giving you the tools here, and we actually have data to back it up, like, you're gonna nail it. You're gonna be successful.
That's cool. Yeah, I can't wait for that. So I think right now, there's a bunch of moments in this conversation where people listening are like, whoa. I think people that play sports outside of football and basketball, number one, are going to be like, you're so rad. And those that did play that are going to just be so inspired and want to hang out with you. So I think there's that moment of this conversation. There's the moment that my wow moment was, you aiding and guiding women that are trying to give birth and have babies. I think that's just so beautifully said by you. And then there's this last moment here that we're talking about where if I'm listening, I'm like, yo, what's her number? I'm calling her because I don't want to be exhausted and depleted in whatever my craft is. So what's the next step for somebody in part 3 or part 2 or whoever's inspired by you? How do they connect with you, and how does this program become something that we can own as the individuals on the receiving end? Yes,
I love it. So you can look us up on our website is sparkssystems.net. You can also contact me at info at sparkssystems.net. We're on Facebook and Instagram as well. And so hopefully Yogi can put that up and you guys can connect with us on Facebook and Instagram as well. But currently we have a testing facility in Phoenix, Arizona, where you can come in and get your metabolic efficiency test done, start on the program. And then we can actually, everything we do doesn't necessarily, after we collect the data, have to be face-to-face. We work with people all over the country via Zoom or phone or, whatever, Skype as well. But we do like to start with having good data. And then we look forward to working with everybody.
I love that. I think you're going to get a lot of calls. That being said, we've asked everybody on this podcast the last few questions over the course of over 100 episodes now. And the first one is, Anna, what are you seeking in your life right now?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I want to have a major impact, and whether that be with just being an incredible wife, I have a stepdaughter, and being an incredible mom, really have an impact on the community here at the hub. And I know that it'll reach further, but that's where I want to start. That's what I'm seeking right now.
And how do you feel about the word limits?
Oh gosh, it's not even in my vocabulary.
I believe it. This was a joy. I have so many more questions, but I've kept you much longer than anticipated. Thank you so much for your time. Extremely gracious. Thanks for the testing and the intel, and I will definitely be back here. Every time I got an ASU game, I'm coming through.
Heck yeah, come on.
I love it. That is Anna Sparks. I'm Yogi Roth, the podcast. Hit the road here from Phoenix. You know how we end this thing, that the only limits that we have in life are the ones we set ourselves. Peace.